But I think the first thing I observe about this phase of education, but in education generally, is that we do spend a lot of time talking to ourselves. There are facts that are commonplace to us within the sector that the rest of the world simply don't know. So we all know, for instance, that most of the brain is developed before you start to talk, that the brain doubles in size in the first year of life, that our developmental progress at 22 months serves as an accurate predictor of educational attainment at 26. We know that. And we know that if you're behind at 5 in your vocabulary development, that you're 4 times more likely to have reading difficulties later. You're 3 times more likely to have mental health issues. You're twice as likely to be unemployed. We know this, but we partnered with the Royal Foundation a couple of years ago on a major piece of social research into the public's knowledge and views about the early years. And what we discovered is that whilst we all know this, most voters and taxpayers don't.
When we set up a program, we asked, did you speak to local parents on what they wanted? And if they came back and said, oh, yes, we did. They said they wanted more speech therapists and more health visitors. We knew that they spoke to speech therapists and health visitors, because the plans that came back and said, yes, we spoke to local parents, and what they wanted was the dog dirt cleaned off the park, the graffiti cleaned up, the broken glass cleaned up. What they wanted was improvements to their physical environment. Now, it's very, very hard for early years settings to do that. But what I'm trying to explain is that the things that we want parents to want, very often they don't want. And unless we figure out what they do want and try to have some negotiation between what you want and what I think your child needs in a very open and transparent way, it will always be patronizing and unhelpful. So my key message is not what do I want a parent to know, but what does that parent want out of this service and how do I facilitate that, and then take it from there to what I think the parent needs, because his position has always been this is a private matter. And I think the problem with early years is it's tied very much into family policy, not into education. So he can talk about schools, he can't talk about early years work. You know, I have no problem with paying people more to work in areas where it's very, very, I mean, that's how business works. If you have a dearth of staff, you pay more to attract better staff, you know. So I mean, I just think that you need a better incentive system.
Have a provision here that starts with children as young as 2. And if I pinpoint on one thing directly, when I talk about the meals, you know, nursery meals aren't free. They're not free for any child who's attending a nursery provision. But yet you go to primary school and then you have free school meals for children in, you know, key stage 1. Well, actually, what about these children who are as young as 2? You know, we've talked a little bit about how the pandemic has sort of, you know, stopped a lot of services for families and children, and having, you know, we haven't been able to sort of keep an eye on those sort of early formative years for those children. They've missed out on quite a lot of support that they could have otherwise have had. But diet is just as important. So when we're looking at providing children with a great, you know, which might be that 1 meal a day, which could, you know, give them the nutrients that they need for the day, and parents, you know, struggling parents who, again, vulnerable twos who aren't able to afford to sort of pay for a school meal, those are really important things to think about.
I don't want to get too technical, and I haven't got slides, but this is as good as it gets. Here we have, this is public spending on education. And the one on the left, you don't need to see the numbers, it doesn't really matter, it's the proportions. This one is secondary education, this one is primary education, and this tiddly little mere speck is early years spend. So in spite of the fact that we know that for every £1 we invest in high quality childcare pre-5, the state saves £13 later on in terms of healthcare and mental health and prisons and unemployment and so on. That's what we're dealing with at the moment. We also know that whilst the early years is not the only point of key neuroplasticity in the brain's development, that the sort of spongy point where we're most flexible and developing fastest, we know that there is another key point of neuroplasticity in adolescence, but that it costs much more and it's much harder to achieve the kind of impact in adolescence that we can have in early years. And that's before you even consider the human cost of starting and being behind your peers right through childhood into adolescence. So to get the impact that we get in early years for £1, in adolescence, it costs £7. We can do it, but why wait? It costs more and it's so much harder.